course, it's a beautiful Tuesday morning here in the city of Lagos, Southwest Nigeria. And of course, it is today in the news here on Vanguard Live. Of course, we are going to be doing newspaper review and analysis, and of course, dishing out to you some of the major headlines that is making rounds in the dailies across the nation this morning. Of course, we are going to be starting off with Vanguard this morning, and of course, we'll be looking at what the Vanguard is leading with. Okay, let's quickly turn to the front page of the Vanguard. Vanguard has Minister, Senate stops El-Rufai, Okotete, Danladi. Well, you can see that story on page 5 of the Vanguard. Well, that story is coming with a rider, and it says awaits security reports, checks, confirms Wike, Keyamo, Alake, Tunji Ojo, and others. Okay, that story is on page 5 of the Vanguard this morning. Let's quickly go above the nameplate of the Vanguard and let's see what we have. FG withdraws contempt charge against NLC TUC. That story is on page 30 of the Vanguard this morning. Okay, let's look at all the story that is making the front page of the Vanguard, and it is Biafra, sit at home is dead, buried. That is coming from the IPOB leader NNAMDI KANU. Of course, that story is on page 13 of the Vanguard this morning. Okay, another story coming from the South Nigeria is no plot to impeach deputy governor. That's coming from the governor himself, Mr. Obaseki. Said there is no plot to impeach his deputy. Okay, let's look at all the stories on the front page of the Vanguard, and it says gunmen kidnap monarch wife in Nasarawa. Gunmen kidnap monarch wife in Nasarawa. That story is on page 6 of the Vanguard this morning. Okay, there is another story, of course, that is going to be of interest to Nigerians, and it is job racketeering at the FCC. IPPIS officer admits collecting bribe. IPPIS officer admits collecting bribe. That story is on page 9 of the Vanguard, and I think you should pick that up to see what that is all about. Okay, before we go, let's quickly take one sport story on the front page of the Vanguard. Women's World Cup. Hard luck as Super Falcons lose via penalty. When hard luck as Super Falcons lose via penalty, I'm sure we all saw that match yesterday, and a lot of Nigerians were heartbroken, when the Super Falcons of Nigeria gallantly lost, to the Lionesses of England. Okay, let's quickly look at the Nation. The Nation this morning is also leading with something that is quite similar with that of Vanguard, and it is security clearance delays El-Rufai, Okotete, Danladi. Security clearance delays El-Rufai, Okotete, Danladi. Well, you can get that story on the Nation if you pick a copy of that paper. Okay, of very good interest is another story on the front page of the Nation, and that is ECOWAS plans review of Niger junta position. Okay, that story has been making round also in the international media of late. And of course, I think you should take a copy of the Nation to see, the current situation in the Niger Republic. Okay, let's quickly move on to Punch before we go on to our analysis. Let's see what the Punch is leading with. Okay, so the Punch is leading with FG withdraws contempt suits against Labour. NLC may suspend strike. FG withdraws contempt suit against Labour. NLC may suspend strike. That story is on page 2 of the Punch this morning. Okay, that is coming with and very interesting rider. Solicitor General writes NLC. Falana says FG suspends suit over Tinubu's intervention. I'm sure you recall that the president met with the leadership of the labor union shortly after declaring the nationwide strike. Okay, let's look at another story just above the nameplate of the Punch newspaper, and that is Senate refuses to confirm El-Rufai, Danladi, and of course, female nominee. Senate refuses to confirm El-Rufai, Danladi, female nominee. That story is on page 8 of the Punch this morning. Okay, let's see another story. Of course, Metro story making the rounds lately, and that is mob attacks cop as Bosch crosses motorist on BRT lane. That's a sad one. And of course, on that note, we are going to end the newspaper review. Of course, we'll be back shortly with a very, very interesting guest who is going to be giving us, a very, very delightful insight into some of the major happenings in the country. Of course, you don't want to miss his analysis. Just stay tuned and we'll be back shortly. Right, you welcome back, and of course it is still Vanguard Live, and my name remains Idowu Bankole. Of course, it's still the morning show. We are broadcasting to you live from Lagos, Southwest Nigeria. Of course, it is the analysis segment, and we have a very interesting guest joining us via Zoom live from the UK. In the person of Mr. Dayo Akintobi. Mr. Dayo Akintobi is the publisher of Ilupeju today. Mr. Dayo, you're welcome to the show.
Good morning, Bankole. Good morning to all our viewers. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, you looking very nice. Of course, I'm sure you're not affected by the subsidy removal here in Nigeria, because I can see you're looking radiant.
Well, I tell you, the problem is global. Even here in the UK, they are going through a lot of this quality of life difficulties to where prices of everything are expensive here too, especially energy. Right now, even though it's summer, but it's very cold and it's raining, so a lot of people are using gas to heat their homes, and the cost of gas is terrible. So there's something called cost of living adjustments that's making life prohibitively expensive even here in the UK, and people are protesting and striking every day. So Nigeria is not alone, I tell you. It's a global crisis. Everywhere is going through this right now.
Right, Mr. Dayo, but a lot of Nigerian youths are not going to share your opinion. As it were, we still know that so many Nigerian youths who really wants to japa, as it were, they want to japa. Maybe you need to say more of this so that Nigerians are enlightened that, of course, the situation here in the country might even be better off than what you see in the UK.
The grass is not always greener on the other side, right. I tell you.
Right. Okay, so let's quickly move on to the business of the day. A lot has been happening in Nigeria, and of course, on the front burner is the confirmation of ministerial nominees screening, and of course confirmation which took place yesterday. And of course, there was a mild drama yesterday in the Senate, when a ministerial nominee, Festus Keyamo, was not, confirmed. The motion was moved, by a senator from Abia Central, that's Mr. Darlington Wokocha, Senator Darlington Wokocha, who moved the motion, to suspend the screening of Keyamo. But the intervention of Mr. President seemed to have saved the day. And a lot of Nigerians commended the Senate that, this is not a rubber stamp Senate. What would you make of the whole thing that happened so far in the Senate?
Well, brought up the motion, Senator Wokocha is the first timer and he's from the Labour Party. So maybe we'll see Labour start acting as true opposition and standing up for what is right and what is and standing against what is wrong. Because by and large, most of the screening up to this point has been bow and go, bow and go, bow and go. They haven't really grilled the candidates extensively or shone a light deeply into their capabilities, their performance, their character. It's pretty much been a pro forma, garden variety, bow and go. It's not been a rigorous screening session. The Keyamo issue came up here because the senators were feeling slighted by his attitude in the previous Senate when the last Senate, when they invited him to come and discuss. If you remember, the government had a program of 20,000 youths in 774 local governments as part of the economic recovery program from COVID, and it was under his ministry, and there were so many billions of naira were allocated to that program, and the Senate invited him to come and explain, and he shunned the Senate and had some very salty language with which to describe them. And at that time, he thought he had got away with it, but you know, institutional memory is deep and long, and they were waiting for him. And he came back this time, and they said, last time we called you, you were in this chamber, you shunned us, you called us all kinds of names. Now you think you will come here and we will kowtow to you. So they said no. Eventually, he explained himself that that money did not come directly to his ministry. It went to the CBN, and the CBN is one who disbursed it directly to the beneficiaries. He just had to deal with the administrative and logistics aspect, but he never saw any money. And the thing is, how come he didn't say it when the Senate invited him 2 years ago? Why is it now that it has the potential of obscuring his nomination, that is now eating humble pie and saying it? So my viewpoint is that he's really not sorry at all. He only just did it to save embarrassment and to save his nomination. But I don't think his arrogance has reduced any, because we've seen him even when he was the presidential spokesman for the election. We saw how he addressed people, how he spoke to people. He was very haughty. So I'm glad the Senate put his feet to the fire. But I don't think based on that we can say they are not in overstam Senate. But the president had to intervene on his behalf, because we know the Senate president ran to the villa and consulted the president, then came back and discussed with his colleagues, and they finally passed his nomination. But
what I think that, you know, it's high time that, you know, the public officers know that, you know, they owe the Nigerian citizen a whole lot of explanation as to what they do while in office. Or don't you think that the Senate, you know, with some of this happening, should, you know, make a law, you know, to compel public officers, you know, to give account of their stewardship while in office, you know, to the Nigerian people? Because I felt that the public hearing that Mr. Keyamo was called for then was to address the Nigerian people on how that money went. You know, don't you think that at this point we should, you know, have a law that is compelling any public officer, you know, to come to the floor of the Senate, you know, anytime they are called upon to come and give such explanation? What do you make of that?
That would be a good law, but it probably will not see the light of day, because that same law that compels public officers will also compel National Assembly as well, because remember, they are also public officers. So if you make such a law, while you are now saying that those in the executive branch who come before the Senate must come clean about their past, about their character, about their performance, the same thing will now compel the senators and the legislators to also do the same thing. Now, will they pass such a law that now shines a light on them and runs the risk of exposing even their own shortcomings? I doubt it. But I understand the larger point you are making, that we should make those who represent us, whether in the executive branch, whether in the legislative, whether even in the judiciary, we should make them more accountable to the people. We should make sure that we screen them in such a way that only the cream of the crop, men and women of the integrity, men and women of proven capacity, proven performance, are the ones that are saying, and I agree with you 100%. The issue is how will we achieve that? How will we get to set up a set of standards that are enforceable, that basically scrutinize each and every person who offers himself for service?
But I think that is the way to go. But then, of course, we await our leaders to take a step on that. Okay, you talked about, you know, the competence and capacity of, you know, these public officers. And of course, that is quite relative to the ministerial nominees. 45 of 48 so far, you know, have been confirmed. And of course, the cabinet of Mr. President is looking quite ready. a lot of people think that this is quite too bogus. Well, I do not know. But what would you make of the capacity, of those that have been confirmed so far? We have the likes of Wike, Keyamo, Alake, and a number of others, to deliver the renewed hope agenda of Mr. President to Nigerians. Do you think that, those that have been appointed so far can, take Nigeria out of this economic hardship? And of course, some of the issues that have been bedeviling the country in the time past.
Well, it's a mixed bag, really, and I can't blame the president because as much as you may want to appoint or nominate people to serve with you who are competent and have proven capacity, there are also political considerations that have to be addressed because you did not get into office all by yourself. You did not run the race and win the race all by yourself. There were those who supported your candidacy. There were those who went out and stomped for you. And one way or another, politics is all about quid pro quo. You do for me, I do for you. So the president is handcuffed by the fact that he has to take political considerations into the reckoning of how he balances his cabinet. But by and large, when I say it's a mixed bag, I see some names there that are from the private sector that have proven themselves to be capable and competent. People like John, Bosuti Jani, Latif Fagbemi San, Dr. Alausa that is based in America, a very highly regarded medical practitioner. So you look at some of the names and you know that these are private sector people who bring private sector experience to bear on administration of the public sector. That in itself is a good thing. But then you look on the other hand and you see people like Wike, you see people like Lalong, you see various people who have been political operatives for many years. I mean, look at Keyamo, for example. He was a minister in the last dispensation. He's come back to me. What did he do in the last dispensation as a minister that was that overwhelmingly fantastic that led to the growth and development of his particular ministry in the affairs of Nigerians that has merited him to come back for a second term, essentially, as a minister? So there are some dead wood, without a doubt. Without naming names, there are some dead wood that are in the cabinet.
Mr. Dayo, I would like to, interject here. You talked about Governor Wike, and, a couple of others. But we all saw what Governor Wike did in Rivers State. He was more like the working governor of the last political dispensation in Nigeria. For 8 years, he told us about, and of course we saw that he built a lot of flyovers, a lot of infrastructure development, took place in Rivers State. Don't you think is worth it? Is worth being in the cabinet of President Tinubu, as well as the ex-governor of Ebonyi State, Umahi too?
Well, without a doubt, Governor Wike. Without a doubt, Governor Wike is viewed as a performing governor. We saw him on television almost every other week, commissioning one project or the other. So definitely has a reputation of being a performer. So maybe he'll be somebody good to put in the Ministry of Works. Who knows? But I don't believe governance is all about just building bridges. I think that governors, I think, should have larger visions. Governors, I think, should be looking at how do we attract multinationals to come and build industries and factories in our states. That how do we empower our youth with IT and artificial intelligence? I think governors should be looking at things like how do we generate power for our industries and for our people. I think the lowest common denomination of governance at the state level, lowest common denominator, that should go without saying, is building roads and bridges. That is the minimal that's expected of you as a governor. So I don't think it's something to beat your chest about that. I build bridges, I build some roads, I build some schools, I build some hospitals. Right. I think governors, by their very position, should have a larger vision, right, for the people of their state. But having said that, okay, so we can did a lot. My issue is Wike is still a PDP governor. How can a PDP governor be serving on an APC cabinet? I think the PDP should expel him or yes, or suspend him or something. He's gone to court to go and get an injunction that his party cannot expel him. But I think it doesn't make sense for him to remain in the PDP and be serving in an APC cabinet. Even the APC should be scared that he could be a mole and could betray them from inside. At least Yoruba people say the insect that eats the vegetable is inside the vegetable itself. So,
but we will leave that to Mr. President to decide. Okay, well, before we actually call it a day on the issue of the ministerial, appointees, the number of ministerial nominees seem to be larger than what we used to have in the past. Currently Nigerians are complaining about economic hardship. The government of President Tinubu has actually been advised to cut cost of governance and all of that. Do you think we need these large numbers at this point? Do you think Mr. President feel that this number of ministers are what he needs to achieve his renewed hope promises to Nigerians?
Well, it's a bit of a balancing act. On the surface, it looks like 48 is too many. Because at the end of the day, okay, federal character, the constitution requires one minister from each state. Right. So you have to have a minimum of 36. But with 48, that's 12 on top of what is really required by the constitution. That's an extra 12. So those 12 have to be put somewhere. Does it mean that we are creating additional ministries, or does it mean that we will have ministers of state? Irrespective, each of these ministers has to have aides, they have to have vehicles, they have to have offices. So the cost of governance increases exponentially with the more ministers you have. And at a time like this, when Nigerians are being asked to make sacrifices in terms of fuel price increase, transportation increase, cost of food increase, ordinary Nigerians are having to make sacrifices. So we would expect that in the interest of equity, fairness, and justice, our elites should also make sacrifices, beginning with the government. So what we were hoping was that we would have exactly 36 ministers, probably consolidate some ministries. If you remember, in the previous administration's first term, power, works, and housing were one ministry before it was split. So we're anticipating that those kind of things will be consolidated again. Things like humanitarian affairs, there was a new ministry that it will be subsumed under the ministry where it emanated from, and that these kind of consolidations will occur to reduce the cost of governance, not just because Nigeria is going through a difficult time now in terms of revenue, but also simply because it's not fair that only the common man be the one to endure the hardship while government is not making it. Makes government look insincere about the sacrifices is asking us to make, and on the other hand, is expanding its own cost profile. Yet, the disposable income in our pockets is reducing on a daily basis. It's not right, it's not fair. If President Tinubu thinks that 48 ministers are better than 36 because they can achieve more, then it's going to show us how the additional cost of the extra 12 will translate to additional benefits for us individually in our pocketbooks. That's the issue.
Yeah, we'll wait and see what the president really wants to do with those numbers. But of course, you spoke about, governors having, broader visions and all of that. And that takes me to the issue in the southeast Nigeria, where every Monday, of course, anywhere in the world, we all know that Monday is for businesses. And then you have, a region in the country being shut down, as a result of, the sit-at-home order declared by Simon Ekpa, one of the IPOB leaders. And just yesterday, the IPOB leader, NNAMDI KANU, came out and said that sit-at-home is dead and buried. What would you make of that pronouncement? Do you think that going forward, economic activities should resume fully in the southeastern states of Nigeria that sit at home usually have been observed on Mondays?
For a long time, IPOB has been disavowing this sit at home. IPOB has said several months ago that it is no longer behind the seat at home, and that it is some hoodlums who have hijacked the seat at home and are enforcing it for financial gain. IPOB has had that strong policy until Simon Ekpa from Finland, or wherever he's broadcasting from, is one who recently now tried to reintegrate IPOB into the issue of Monday sit at home. But that IPOB has disavowed that for a very long time. Now, NNAMDI KANU has come and spoken up directly through his counsel, I think yesterday, saying it is dead and buried, because the sit at home, even if it started as a symbolic protest, as a way of expressing a grievance, it has become counterproductive to the people you are claiming to fight for, because economic activities grind to a complete halt. You can't imagine how many billions of naira have been lost in productivity over several Mondays of sit at home. How much property and goods have been destroyed by the hoodlums who go terrorizing those on the street who dare open their shops. We see videos of them upturning produce, upturning consumer goods, destroying things, breaking down shops simply because they dare to open on Monday. So my question is, if you are claiming to fight for the betterment of a certain group of people, how are you improving their situation by financially decimating them, from making them lose one day of business? Most of these people are daily paid. It's what they sell on a daily basis that they used to feed for that day. So by virtue of locking them in on Monday, you've made sure they don't eat for that day. Right? Then secondly, there's been a lot of destruction of goods and shops and things like that many of these people can't recover from in terms of rebuilding or restocking. So essentially, you are cutting off your nose to spite your face. You claim you are fighting for a group of people, but they are the very same people you are harming to get their message across. It's counterproductive, and I'm glad that NNAMDI KANU has spoken up. Hopefully, this will now give the citizens the courage to stand up to the hoodlums. Because for months I've always stood on the ground that IPOB does not sanction this sit at home. IPOB has washed his hands of this sit at home a couple of years ago, and that is just never do wells who are the ones trying to take advantage of an unholy situation that just came about and took on a life of its own.
Right, well said, Mr. Dell. Now, do you think President Tinubu should release NNAMDI KANU?
I've always believed that the NNAMDI KANU thing requires a political solution. I've always felt like discussions need to take place between the Southeastern leaders, between religious leaders, traditional leaders, political leaders. They all need to come around the table and sit down with the administration and discuss what the issues are. Because, truth be told, the Constitution guarantees the right for self-determination. So the original concept is within the right of the Southeastern people. The original concept of what they were fighting for. Now, whatever they are holding NNAMDI KANU for, I think they accused him of making seditious statements. They were all in furtherance of that primary objective. So I don't think that coming with the big hammer of the law or whatever the case may be is going to ultimately bring a solution, because his people see him as a martyr. They see him as fighting for their cause, just as Sunday Igboho was seen as fighting for the cause of Oduduwa land and all that as well. So I think that there is a better possibility for settlement through discussion than through violence or through legal means or imprisonment or going to court to try and get a conviction and locking anybody up for any length of time. If he has offended the law, let him apologize. Let us sit at a negotiating table. Let everybody accept their faults. Let everybody apologize to whom apology is due, and let us move on. Let the country move forward, whether together, whether separated, whether anyhow. But the bottom line is, this is a stalemate. There's no progress. He's stuck there. His matter is not moving forward. The Southeast too is stuck there. Their matter is not moving forward. So the current situation is not benefiting anybody. Right. So it's better that we come to the table, discuss it, and let's resolve it.
Okay, Mr. Dayo, before we let you go, let's quickly have your thoughts on the impasse between NLC and of course the federal government of Nigeria. Just yesterday, the FGA announced withdrawal of the contempt charge against NLC, and of course the labor union leaders are expected to suspend the strike action. What do you make of the going back and forth, labor calling off strike, FG withdrawing and all of that? What exactly do you make of the whole matter?
It's looking like a broken record. We are starting to get used to the fact that NLC will come and bare his teeth and bare his fangs and then retreat again, and then come out and bare his fangs and retreat again. So people have lost faith in the NLC and its integrity to fight the cause of the common man. But in this case, well, it looks like President Tinubu has intervened. He had a discussion with the labor leaders. The reason the federal government went to court to fight was because there's a subsisting court order that says you can't strike. And NLC and TUC had what they call, quote unquote, a protest march on August 2.
Right.
So the question is, what's the difference legally between a strike and a protest? Because NLC, the labor leaders are hiding under the fact that it was not a strike, it was a protest. But the federal government sees it as a protest, and they went to court for contempt of court, that there's a court order saying you can't protest, and you still protested on August 2. So we want you arrested and locked up for disobeying a court order. Anyway, it was just a gambit to bring everybody to the table so that NLC can sheath his sword, federal government too can retreat from his. So now they are talking again. Now that they've withdrawn the court case of contempt, NLC has said, okay, good. Now we can negotiate in good faith. Let us get back to the table. For now, we won't organize any other protest. Federal government, you too, you've dropped your case. So back to status quo. Let's open negotiations again. And the primary sticking point, minimum wage and palliatives. Well, the government has said the states should start organizing cushioning measures, and many states are starting to do it with buses, with food packs, with various things. I saw one state is giving 10,000 to each of the vulnerable people on its social register. So states are already starting to try and sort out the issue of cushioning measures. So the primary thing now is the negotiation on the minimum wage, which is going to be a sticky one because half of the states are not even paying the 30. They can't afford to pay the 30,000 existing minimum wage. If it is now increased to 100,000 or any other amount, how will they pay? Maybe only 2 or 3 states can pay. But at least the good thing is that for now, the threat is eliminated. The rancor between the two of them has abated. They cannot get back to the discussion table. No threat of strike. At the same time, open door to negotiating to resolve this issue finally in favor of Nigerians.
All right, Mr. Toby, I'm afraid that this is where we are going to call it today because my producer is telling me that we do not have much time left. We hope to have you again, hopefully next week to have this very, very deep insight into some of the major happenings in Nigeria. Once again, thank you very much, Mr. Dayo Akintobi.
Thank you very much for having me. Good morning, Nigeria. Good morning to all our viewers.
Right. Okay, we've been speaking with Mr. Dayo Akintobi. He is the publisher of Ilupeju Today. And of course, he has provided us with very deep insight into all of the happenings making rounds and of course making major headlines in the dailies across Nigeria. Do not forget to like and follow us on all our platforms currently showing on your screen, and of course we would be back again tomorrow for Today in the News. Until then, I am Ido Bankole.